All right, everyone, welcome to this week's presentation from DBA Fundamentals. This week is answering the auditor's call with automation with Andy Levy. Today is April 9th, 2024. In the top right-hand corner of the screen, you should be able to see all of the leaders of the DBA Fundamentals group: Steve Cantrell, Shane O'Neill, and myself, Kevin Wilkie. If you need to get hold of us for any reason, the easiest way to get hold of us is on our Twitter handles on the right-hand side of our names. Get us pretty quickly. Below that is the various ways you can get hold of us on social media. The easiest, where probably most of you get hold of us or see something from us each time, is Meetup, where you actually were able to see this week's presentation and get to it. At least hopefully that's where most of you found it. The easiest way you can actually view anything having to do with us is on our website, dbafund.com. You'll see any of our future presentations as well as all of our past presentations, or links to them, and you can find it really easily on there. Also below that is our YouTube site, dbafundtube.com, where you can see all of the past presentations. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you can see exactly when we've actually posted presentations. Know it right the very minute, so you can view it right away. Below that is how you get a hold of us on Twitter, DBA Fun, our Slack channel, and also our LinkedIn group. Some upcoming conferences where you can actually, some of us will be at some of these. This is the SQL Saturday in Jacksonville on May 4th, 2024. There's also one coming up closer to the end of this month. The SQL Saturday Atlanta is on April 20th this year. It's in Alpharetta, Georgia. So if you're near us, be sure to come out to that. I'll be at that one. Some of the people will be at the one in Jacksonville on May 4th, 2024. If you can't get to that, be sure to come out to Data Grillin' on May 16th and 17th. That is always a fun event. Be sure to join us at that if you can. Also, be sure to turn off your video and mute yourself, so that way we can pay attention to Andy and learn all kinds of goodness about all kinds of things you want to show and not show to auditors. Be sure to type any questions you have into the chat, so we can make sure to voice them and get him to answer them as much as we can. I'll be watching them off screen, so that I can get them into his queue so you can be answered, as well as answering as many as I can by myself. And with that, we have our Andy Levy's little slide showing what great things he has accomplished and what more he is going to accomplish. So with that, Andy, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody, for taking time out of your day to join us here. Let me just go ahead and get my screen sharing going here. And I think I'm about to share the wrong screen. So let me start that over. There we go. So it's that. And then I promise this will not happen frequently. There we go. So there we go. So we should be seeing my title slide now, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, terrific. So again, thanks everybody for coming out. Check this out. I have a lot of fun with the session because there's a lot of code, and I mean, there's gonna be some slides, but I like showing off code. Just really quick, a little bit about me. My name's Andy Levy. I'm a database administrator at Inspira Financial. Used to be a company called Benefit Resource, but we're going through a little bit of a changeover after an acquisition this past summer. My contact information here is in the bottom left. Don't worry about grabbing this right now because it will also be on the last slide at the end, and we're going to publish this. I'm going to publish a blog post, and this will all be out there. I am a bit of a PowerShell zealot. I love scripting in PowerShell, and my rule is pretty much If I can do it in PowerShell, I'm going to prefer doing it there because it means I can repeat it, and we'll get into that later on. I've been in IT, and holy cow, that in 2 months it will be 25 years since 1999. Started out in web development and did some server administration back in the NT4 days. Classic ASP that may bring back some good memories or maybe some bad memories for folks. Um, also done some system integration, did some database development, and for the past 7 years, do the math real quick. Yes, 7 years, full-time production DBA. Aside from that, when I'm not working, I split my year in half. And this weekend actually is the beginning of my warm weather half, which is camping. We bought a camper during COVID, and we're out camping as many weekends as we can from April until the beginning of October. And then in the colder months, the other half is I am a mentor for a FIRST robotics competition team. Our local high school, where my kids are students, we has a FIRST robotics team, and so we go out. We build every year. We build a 150-pound robot, and we go out. We compete. And no, it is not battle bots. I'm going to head off that question right now. The rules explicitly state it is not combat robotics. But it is a ton of fun working with these kids, and the things that these kids are doing with 3D printing, CNC machining, programming, strategy, you name it. It's amazing what they pull off every year building these things. So it's a lot of fun. I will talk to you about it for hours on end if you don't stop me. So what are we covering today in this presentation here? Answering the auditor's calls to automation. As a DBA, I get a lot of questions pertaining to SOC and SOC 2 audits, and you probably do too. Auditing is a really big thing, especially as things get more regulated. There's a lot more scrutiny on systems every year. So these are the common things that my InfoSec team and my auditors, who they're kind of one and the same, but that's growing a little bit now. Common things that they're asking for every year when we go through this audit process, and sometimes just when we get questionnaires from prospective clients. Um, we want to make sure that we are documenting that we do the things we say we do. We say we back up our databases on a particular schedule. Can we prove that? We're going to create some documentation that shows that, yes, we really are doing this and have been doing it historically. And we want to make this process fast, repeatable, and as pain-free as possible. Before I started scripting all this out, it was a major pain to go in every year. Okay, I'm going to run this query. I'm going to run that query. I'm going to compile this all to an Excel file, and I got to take screenshots, this, that, and the other. I don't have the screenshots part down to a script, but now I've got this down to where I have a script and I run it when I get the request from my auditors once a year. And about 20 seconds later, because I have a fairly small environment, but about 20 seconds later, I have an Excel file I give to them. And the best part is, after I give them that script, or that Excel file rather, I don't hear any more questions. I don't hear back from them ever again. Which, I mean, they're really nice folks, but if I don't get follow-up questions about the auditing data that I provided, that means that I did a complete and thorough job, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. But what are we not going to talk about? Because auditing, this is a huge, huge topic. There's a lot of places you can go with this. So what are we not going to talk about today? We're not going to get into your specific requirements. Every company has their own requirements for auditing, inventory, alert, things like that. I'm just going to give you a starting point, give you some tools so you can do this stuff a little bit more efficiently and effectively. We're not going to talk about SQL Audit, the feature in SQL Server. It's kind of could get a little confusing there, but there's a feature built into SQL Server if you haven't run into it yet called SQL Audit. We're not going to talk about that. That's its own thing. And it was probably a year or so ago, Josephine Bush did a really good talk on SQL Audit, I think for this group. You can probably find that in the history out on YouTube. We're not going to talk about licensing. Licensing is a really big, complex topic. I don't have all the answers. We're not going to do this to just make sure that you got all your licensing correct. But we are going to collect some data that we can maybe use to help inform our licensing decisions. So questions that I get asked by my auditors. What SQL Server instances do we even have? What's out there in the environment? Are we staying up to date on patching? That's a really big thing. My previous employer, we were actually contractually obligated to stay within a certain level, we can only be X number of patches behind to stay in compliance with the contracts that we had. Who has access to SQL Server? That's a huge one for security teams, right? Who even can access these databases? Are you watching the error log? There's a lot of really good stuff in the error log. Take a look at it. You can get a lot of information out of that about what's going on in your SQL Server environment. Are we using encryption? This is a huge one that we get asked on a regular basis for our our prospective client questionnaires and even our current client questionnaires. Do you encrypt your data at rest? How are you encrypting it? Is your data getting backed up? I mentioned that before. We say we're backing up on a particular schedule. Are we actually doing that? Similar kind of thing. Are we performing regular integrity checks of our data? I've been asked that by our InfoSec and audit teams. Are we running integrity checks? Because our customers ask us those questions. And the last one, which is where the scripting really comes in, is can you provide a narrative of how you collected that information? And Jeffrey Snover, the creator of PowerShell, he was really fun. He is really fond of saying, you can't put clicks in source control. Um, so you know, and so and if you can't put it in source control, it also implies that you can't put it into a document. So if I need to provide a narrative of how did I collect all this information, do I really want to go into a Word document and type, well, I clicked here and then I clicked here and then I clicked there and I did this and I did that? That gets really tedious and it's just way more work than I want to get involved with. But if I script it, if I can just say, here is a script that I ran, go take a look at it. That's how I collected the data. Now I've answered the question. One more point on the error log, and I'll show it when we get there. Um, One of the things that I do is um, I provide the error log path to our InfoSec team so they can point our SIM, security information and event management tool, at those paths. So they can watch the error log with their tools for anything that might come up. So why am I going to automate this process? Number one, I'm lazy. I want to save time. I want to do this quickly and get on to the more interesting, more fun things that I have going on in my day-to-day job. I'm lazy. I want this to be repeatable. You noticing a theme here? I ask my family, I'm lazy. Um, no, I don't want to have to do things the same, repeatedly, um, manually. I want to be able to just run a script and do this, and it's going to do the exact same thing every single time. And like I said before, the code provides the narrative. I've actually given a PowerShell script to a PHP developer. He's never used PowerShell before. But I was able to give him a PowerShell script, and because I write my PowerShell using DBA tools and follow the PowerShell conventions, he can read through that. He read through that and said, "I don't know PowerShell, but I know exactly what your script is doing because the function names make sense, the parameter names make sense. I can follow through this and say, yep, okay, here's where he did this, here's where he did this, here's where he did this. I understand how this process works." So now I've provided the narrative by providing the code that I wrote and I ran. And then I put that into our source control repository. And I just say, okay, if you want to know how I got this, go look over there. And oh, by the way, you've got the full history of all the changes I made to that script as well. And I'm doing all this, like I said, so I can do the things I want to do. Nobody really wants to be collecting audit information all day long. You don't want to spend even one day. It's one day out of what, 200 or so that you work in a year. But do you really want to spend that much time even doing it? I'd much rather be digging in and figuring out, why do we have 30 indexes on this table that's only got 20 columns on it, things of that nature. So I'm going to be using DBA tools, PowerShell module for all this. And because you're talking to your InfoSec team, they're going to want to know, is DBA tools safe? Really quickly, it is signed code. It is cryptographically signed. You know that if it's been tampered with after it was published. Every time a pull request is considered for merging into the main tree, it's run through a battery of tests that are looking for correct behavior, as well as anything nefarious. If you install DBA tools from the PowerShell gallery that's hosted by Microsoft, they scan for viruses. You can be pretty safe and assured that there's nothing bad that's going to show up there. If you install through the Chocolatey package manager, same thing. They review packages, they're doing virus scans, that is safe. And if you're really worried about it, you're really concerned, it is open source. It's all on GitHub. You can download the source and build it all yourself and inspect it if you really worry about it. So those are the slides. Before we jump into demos, do we have any questions out there? I'm going to guess that's a no. You all can hear me, right? I hope. Yeah, wait, I did see a hand pop up. Okay, yes. So, okay, you can hear me. Great. All right. So demos. I am into Visual Studio Code here, and what I've got is I just have it's a fairly long script, and this will all be published out to GitHub and on my blog. The first thing I'm going to do, I've already installed DBA tools. You can install DBA tools from in PowerShell by running install-module DBA tools. I'm also importing a module called import Excel. We'll get into that on the second demo. I'm just going to run this all one step at a time here. So I'm going to go ahead and run the import for DBA tools. That's going to take a moment because it's a fairly large module. There's over 700 functions in DBA tools now. It's expansive and it is comprehensive. And it's a tremendous set of tools. It makes me look like a wizard. Next thing I'm going to do is set DBA tools insecure connection -session only. What is this?
Yep. Hey,
Oh,
I don't
yep.
know if you can hear me or not.
Yes.
We don't see the demo.
Oh, I'm not. Oh, you know what? That's right, because I was supposed to switch screens that I'm sharing. I'm so sorry. I'm also going to turn off my camera while I'm doing the demos just to free up some bandwidth. Okay, why is it not sharing now? Share.
Come on, Andy.
There we go.
Sharing is caring.
Well, okay, so there we go. Now we should have the screen shared. I hope. Am I sharing the screen? Can somebody just confirm, please?
Confirmed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I'm very sorry about that. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm importing the DBA tools and import Excel modules. The next thing I'm going to do is set DBA tools insecure connection -session only. So Microsoft back in November of 2022 released a new version of their SQL Server client libraries, which by default assumes you're going to have a secure connection, meaning you're using TLS certificates that are signed by a recognized certificate authority for connecting to your servers. I don't have that on my laptop where I'm doing this. So set DBA tools insecure connection basically disables that for my session, or it will disable those checks. And I'm using -session only, so it only affects the current PowerShell session. I don't want to make this a global change to everything that I'm doing. So we can see here, it is just going to blindly trust the certificates that it sees and know it's not going to encrypt the connection. So first thing I can do, and I'm not actually going to run this because it will take a very long time, is find DBA instance. Find DBA instance will scan one computer, it will scan a subnet, it will scan all of Active Directory, it will scan your whole network if you let it. Excuse me. Looking for SQL Server instances that are running. Again, I'm not going to run this right now because it could take a very long time. Also, I'm on my hotspot, so I don't know what it would even find. It could be very interesting. So if I want to just go out there and find what instances exist on in my environment, I can run that. So this is where I said I wasn't going to talk about licensing, but I'm going to dip into it just a little bit here. I'm going to run get DBA computer system, which is my local machine. And then I'm going to select the name of the computer, the number of processors, and the amount of physical memory, because we are licensed by how many cores that we use. So on this server, I've got 4 logical processors. And so I would have to license 4 cores if this is a production environment. I use registered servers both here and in my production work environment because it's a really easy way. If you haven't used it, it is such an easy way to keep track of your servers and make it really easy to connect to them without having to remember, oh, gee, what's that server called? What's that one called? What servers are even there? I use central management server. You can either do it as a registered server in Management Studio, which will be just local to your computer, or you can have an actual server that is acting as your your central management server to maintain that inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. This is going to get all of the registered servers that I have. This is taking a moment. It should not be this slow. And because I'm using central management server instead of registered servers, I need to include the include self parameter, because otherwise you can't register the server that hosts central management server in central management server because it's already there. So you have to tell this function include the central management server in that list. So there we go. So here are my registered servers. It's actually doubled up because I also have Azure Data Studio. I have that installed and I have some servers registered there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to call get DBA registered server again and extract just the server names and save that off to a variable. So now I've got a list instances. There we go. So now I have a list of those instances that I can now work off of and pass into all my functions. So I mentioned the error log and having the sim watch those paths. So this blew up my security guy's mind the first time I did it for him. He said, "Hey, how can I watch this?" I ran just get DBA default path, which just gets your data path, your log path, your backup path, and excuse me, also your error log path, and just return the error log locations. So I ran this, copied, pasted it into an email, and it was about 30 seconds from when he asked me for it to when he had it. And it blew his mind that quickly I could tell him, here's where you're going to go to look for the error logs. Next, SQL Server patch levels. DBA tools can check your patch levels for you and includes its own build reference, which is maintained as part of the project to keep track of all the versions, all the knowledge base articles that correspond to it, the version numbers, the CU number, the service pack number, if you're still using something that runs service packs. So the first thing I do is I update get DBA build reference. So I make sure I've got the latest version of that build reference. Now I'm going to run get DBA build pointed at all of my instances, and then I'm just going to pull out the name of the instance, the build, name, service pack, cumulative update, KB level. So that's the knowledge base article associated with that service pack or cumulative update, how long it's supported, and then I'm going to sort that. And there we go. So I've got 3 instances on this machine. I've got one running 2017 CU31, I've got 2019 CU22, and I've got SQL Server 2022 with no cumulative update listed here at all. Now, my auditors, they want to know, well, are we staying consistent with our rule of we're only ever going to be 1 cumulative update behind? The only way I can get that out of get DBA build is if I know what the current latest cumulative update is and where I currently am. But DBA Tools has test DBA build. And so what I can do is I can tell I only want to be behind at most 1 cumulative update. So I'll go ahead and run this. Instead of get DBA build, I'm going to run test DBA build. And that's going to take them. There we go. So in addition to returning what we saw previously, it tells me I have a cumulative update level of 31. My target is 30 because the current latest for 2017 is 31. My rule for the maximum I can be behind is 1 cumulative update. Am I compliant? Yes, compliant is true. Great. But then I go over here to 2019. Well, I'm not compliant because I just made that horrible. I'm running 2022, but my target was 2024. So I am no longer in compliance, compliant false. That's going to send up a red flag for my auditors. Same thing here with 2022. I'm not running any cumulative update. I'm targeting cumulative update 11 at the oldest. So I am still not compliant. So that's really great. I can take this and say, all right, I have these servers that are now not compliant, and I can go ahead and schedule getting them patched and updated. This might be a good place to pause. Any questions so far?
No questions at the moment.
Okay, terrific. So I'll keep going. The next one was, are you encrypting your connections to SQL Server? And that's, again, that's a big thing. Like I said, Microsoft is now kind of forcing the issue by assuming you're going to be encrypted by default and you'll have certificates. And you know, my InfoSec folks, they really like knowing that even though everything's behind the firewall, it's still encrypted, because a lot of attacks do originate from behind the firewall. And if we can encrypt that traffic, even though it's on a so-called private network, we have that extra layer of security. So I'm going to work. So I'm going to go out to, excuse me, go out to all of my instances and say, well, what certificates even exist out there that could be using? So I've got for each server, yeah, I've got I've got a certificate here that's potentially usable, and I created that on October 10th of last year, and boy, I'm pretty sure that was right before SQL Saturday Boston, maybe even on the way to SQL Saturday Boston, where I gave this presentation. These next two, I have to do these in an elevated session only because I am an elevated PowerShell session, because I am running these against the local computer. If I'm running them against remote machines, I don't have to do this in an elevated session. Get DBA network certificate is going to tell me not just that a certificate exists, but what is the certificate that's being used by this instance of SQL Server. So we could have a dozen certificates installed on the computer, but only one is being used by SQL Server, and this is the one that we're using right here. And we can again see we got when it was generated, when it expires. This certificate is still valid. The next one is get DBA force network encryption. I don't want that. And what this is going to do, it's actually going to go and check the configuration of each instance that I pass in. And it's going to tell me if from the server end, we force all connections to be encrypted. There we go. So this one takes a little bit longer to run. So we just got the first hit back from my 2017 instance. And we can see, well, we do have a certificate, but we are not forcing the client to use it. We really like them to, but we're not forcing the issue. And we could configure SQL Server to require encrypted connections always. And I've tried to do that in various environments. Sometimes though, you have trouble because not everybody recognizes all the CAs and whatnot. But in general, I try to do that. In this case though, on my local machine, yeah, it's available, but we're not forcing the issue from the server end. Next up, inventory of all our databases. People want to know what databases are even out there, what exists. So get DBA database will go out and collect information about every database that's on every instance that we pass in. So I'm going to go out and ask for the name of the instance, the name of the database, the status. Is it online, offline, read only? Is it accessible? Who the owner is? How large is it in megabytes? And then I'm going to sort it by the server instance and then the name of the database. And this behind the scenes is using the SQL Server Management Objects, SMO. So what you're actually getting back here is a collection of SMO database objects, which means you can interrogate this for a whole bunch of other properties. You can also execute changes to your databases through SMO methods. We're not going to get into that today, but it is really, really powerful once you get into that. But here we've got a database here called SATs. It's on my SQL 17 instance. It is normal status. It is accessible. I'm the owner apparently, and it is 207 megabytes in size. Excuse me. And that includes all your data files as well as your log file, that size in megabytes. And there are other methods for getting the size in gigabytes, terabytes, kilobytes, megabytes, or any measure you like. It's very, very flexible that way. Going back to encryption really quick, we can use database certificates for doing encryption. Get DBA DB certificate. One thing I kind of skipped over here and I didn't get into is generally with DBA tools functions, if you see get DBA and then another noun, it's probably going to act on a server or some other high level object. Get DBA DB, like get DBA DB certificate, that's typically going to operate against a single database or a collection of databases. And it's going to get details at the database level. So I'm going to get DBA database certificate. I'm going to look at the master database. I'm going to skip over the ones that start with whose names start with 2 pound signs. And I'm just going to get information about those certificates. Now, I could also collect this by running a query against, systat certificates in the master database. And I haven't checked, but this may even be doing that behind the scenes. I don't recall. But by integrating it fully into a PowerShell script, everything is object-based, and I can do a lot more with it later on. And so here's our certificate that I created for managing transparent data encryption on this instance. And again, it was created back in October of 2023. I created it to be good for 1 year, and that's in the master database. I'm going to go back to get DBA database now. And I'm going to collect some more information specifically about whether those databases are encrypted and how they get encrypted. So I'm going to use a calculated property here. I'm going to get the encryption type And this all comes off of the SMO database objects. So that's what we're iterating over, that collection, and that's what the $_ is. That's as each time through the loop, that's what we're or through the pipeline, we're going after the database object, the database encryption key property, and then the encryption type that hangs off of that. So we're getting encryption type, the encryption state, the algorithm we use, and the encryptor name. That's the certificate that we used to encrypt the database. So that takes a minute. It's going to bring back every database, and it'll tell us if, so we've got Stack Overflow database here is not encrypted. TempDB, because I have I do have at least one encrypted database in this environment, in that server, or that instance rather. That one does get encrypted. Let's scroll up, find another one here. So here we go. Here we go. So here's my DBA things database. It's encrypted, AES 256 encryption, and it's using that TDE certificate that we saw before. And we can see encryption is enabled. So again, I'm asked, do you encrypt your data at rest? Well, here's a list of all of our databases, and here's the ones that are encrypted and not encrypted. Next up is who has access to these databases? That's a huge one, right? We're always asked who has access to this environment, or rather who has access to this database. And I'm going to cut this 3 different ways. I'm going to start by looking at the logins. There's a total of 6, I guess. So I'm going to start at the instance level. Get DBA login, get DBA server role, and get DBA server role member. These are all going to operate at the server level, or the instance rather, and get us a list of here's all the logins that exist, and then the roles that exist at the server, the instance level, and then who is a member of those roles. So we'll start with get DBA login. And wow, that's a lot of logins. I don't remember creating all those. That's right. Yeah, so I created a whole bunch of logins. So I've got, here's SA, and I can prove that, hey, guess what? SA is disabled. We want SA to be disabled by default. We've got, actually, zoom a little bit differently here. So we got Renee Belloc. That login exists. That's a SQL Server login. And we've got Sala. That's also a SQL login. And let's see, do I have another one that we can, I'll scroll up a little bit more. There actually is a theme to these logins. And it's collecting both Windows logins. There we go. Both Windows logins and SQL logins. So we've got Marcus Brody, Marion Ravenwood. We've got system, NT Authority system. That's a Windows user. The service account is a Windows user. And I know I have another one here. There we go. And it even gets our Windows groups that have been given logins. So we've got a group called mutants and a group called robots here. So in addition to just the logins, it's getting Windows groups, it's getting Windows users, and I greatly prefer, I don't know about anyone else, I'd much rather use Windows groups, AD groups, for managing access to my SQL Server instances, because it makes the user management somebody else's problem. You know, I grant great access to a particular group, and then group membership, that goes over the help desk and the system admins. They manage all that. I don't have to make any changes in my environment to as people get added or removed from the organization, or just from roles. Up next, get DBA server role is going to list out all the server level roles that we have, and it'll tell us, are these fixed roles or are they not fixed roles? So we've got, actually, these are all fixed roles here, with the exception of public, but we've got all the system roles that you're used to seeing there. And then get DBA server role member will go through all those roles and tell us who is a member of those roles. So I am sysadmin. I have another account for myself that's in sysadmin. I don't have a lot of other, role membership at the server level that's set up here, but I can show here's who has sysadmin in SQL Server on these in this environment. Any questions at this point?
Let's see. Using the get DBA database
Yep.
command, is it possible to see the size of the logs in data files instead of collectively seeing it?
Yes, it is. There is a, oh boy, should I go ahead and type on the fly? Yeah, I'm going to go for it. Database. Database. And what, did I get that right? Overflow 2010. I hope it's, nope, okay. Yes, okay. So what I did was I got a reference to the Stack Overflow 2010 database here, and we can still see we got size MB. But if I go a little bit further into the object, oops, that wasn't what I wanted. Boy, see now, see, this is where I'm going to get myself in trouble. Let's see, file. Oh, right, it's right. File groups. So you start digging into the file groups in the, actually I'm gonna quit that. I had Thunderbird open. I didn't need that anymore. So there's a hierarchy that you have to kind of walk down, right? So we've got so we got the database file groups, and now here is a size, and that's the rows file group. It's a file group for rows rather. And then I can go even further and see, there are individual files in that file group, right? Because think about how you set up a file group and then each file group has one or more files in it. So at this point, files only has that file group only has one file in it. So by going to file groups.files, we get the one file in that file group. So we've got size, and this is in megabytes, I believe. We got used space, we've got available space. We even have some metrics on bytes read and written right there, and what our file growth setting is for that file. So, and you can do a similar thing with the logs. So yes, that is all available. You just have to dig a little bit deeper into the SMO object that gets returned.
Perfect. And the last question we had, can you also use import-CSV if your file has more info in CSV and treat it as an array of objects?
Would that be with respect to collecting the list of SQL Server instances?
I believe so.
Yes. Yeah. If you just have a file that lists all the instances that you have in your environment, absolutely, you can import CSV from that file into a collection and pass that in using into the SQL instance parameter.
Right, and then you don't have to just be able to call on the names. You can have any extra information you need in there as well.
Right. Yep. And yeah, so what you can, and I mean, I'm using, yeah, I used central management server, registered servers. You can use a text file as your source. You could use an Excel file if you have it listed in Excel, because you can use import Excel to read Excel files. You just have to pick out the correct column from that file. The SQL instance parameter on all of these functions takes a collection, so you can pass one or more instance names into it. You can pass, you could pass 1,000 if you wanted to. It might take you a little while to get everything returned, but you would still get there. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it did. Yeah,
Okay,
I think
cool.
that's it. So
All right.
continue on.
So we will keep going. So if you notice, every time I was calling these functions, right, I was passing in -SQL instance where this is actually a PowerShell feature I'm going to show off real quick. Every time I'm calling -SQL instance, all instances, passing that variable in, we can shortcut that in PowerShell using PS default parameter values. And what you can do, it's a hash, it's a collection. And there's even pattern matching in here. So what I can do is I can say for any function whose name starts with get-dba, that's the get DBA star there, the parameter named SQL instance, just default that value to the $all instances variable that I have. So now by doing that, I don't have to do -SQL instance all instances every time I call one of these functions. And you can see right here, I've excluded it, but it's still going to work. It comes in really handy. Just if you do use it, make sure that when you're done with it, you unset that that default, because otherwise you might start getting things that you don't expect. You can also override it, but you might get some weird stuff that you don't expect if you set that default and then you forget about it later on. Ask me how I know. Uh, so going back to logins and users, we collected all the logins. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it at the database level. Get DBA DB user, and I'm going to exclude system users. I'm going to collect all the users. Oh, I didn't run that. I didn't run that. That's right. So I need to run this, and then I can. There we go. So I'm going to run get DBA DB user, exclude the system users because they're system users. Those are well documented by Microsoft. And I'm going to get all of the users in each one of the databases on each one of my instances. And because I didn't pass a specific database name here, it's literally going to go through every database. So now we've got wide world importers. Here are the users and their associated login. So if I have a user in my database that has a different name than the login that's associated with them, I'll see two different names there because the database, the username is different from the login name. And then I can also go to look at the database roles. Who has what roles in this database, just like we did at the instance level. And I'm going to exclude the fixed roles because hopefully, because I'd really just want to see the non-default roles that I've created. So I didn't really create any, but in wide world importers, we have some roles for specific sales groups. And then we can go one more level and find out who is a member of which roles. Notice I'm not including exclude. I am not excluding fixed roles here because what I want to see is who has DDL admin, who has DB data reader, who has data writer. I don't need an inventory of the fixed roles when I just get the roles because again, Microsoft has that documented. I don't need to document anything there for my auditors. But when we get down to who is a member of which roles, yeah, and that took a second. So we can get right here into in wide world importers, Henry Jones Jr. has DB data reader. Marcus Brody is doing external sales, even though he got lost in his own museum. We got Marion Ravenwood is in Rocky Mountain sales. So now we have a list of, oh, and then we've got up here in AdventureWorks, we have those AD or Windows groups we got mutants, robots, they are in data reader. We've got clones and Earthicans who are have the data writer group role, and aliens, we are denying data writer to them. So we've got this inventory now of here are the roles and who is a member of each of those roles, both at the instance level and the database level. The last one, which I'm going to skip over running it right now, but I will run it in the second demo, is get DBA permission. And I'm going to skip it right now because it's going to take a little bit of time. Get DBA permission, includes server level. This is going to get every securable and who has what permissions on it across the entire instance. So if you think about it, if you get a really large instance, this could take a very long time. At a previous job, I had 9,000 databases on one instance. I would not run this on that instance because it would take hours, if not days. I would find some other way to collect that data. But we will run it when I do the second demo here. So that's through permissions and roles and everything else. This last bit is, are we doing the things that we say we're doing? So we say that we're performing backups on a regular basis. Get DBA last backup is going to go out and tell us for each database, what was the last full, last differential, and last log backup that was taken. And we'll wait for that. There we go. Now, I mean, it's just scrolling a whole bunch of data up here, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, how am I actually going to make use of that? That's the second demo where we're actually going to collect all of this into a single Excel file. So we've got here Stack Overflow 2010. We did our last full backup at 8. Ooh, wow, that one was quite a while ago. That was it was 8 o'clock yesterday morning, and then we did a log backup today at noon. And then the utility database, again, 8:30-ish yesterday morning, full backup was today at noon. So, and then we've got DBA things, we take differential backups. So this one, we took a log backup at 9:02 yesterday morning, last full backup, or that was the last full. The last differential was at 12:07 p.m. today, and the last log backup was yesterday morning. So that's all well and good. That's when we last took a backup, but our auditors want to know, well, okay, great. Are you doing this thing every day, or every 15 minutes, or every however often, like you say you are? Well, yes, but I can prove that by looking at get DBA DB backup history. This will go through the backup history for each database, and then it will tell me, I'm gonna pick out the name of the database, what type of data backup it was, the start, when it started, when it ended. I'm only going to look at the most recent 100 because, or the first 100 that I get back, because this is potentially thousands upon thousands of records that come back. And wow, that came back a lot quicker than I expected. But yeah, it's just going to keep scrolling and scrolling. That was just for 100. And we've got here our utility database. Here we had a full backup on the 8th at 8:25 a.m. And then we had a log backup, was it 35 minutes later? Another one at 7:15 p.m. yesterday. You can tell when I turn this computer on and off from this. But that's just 100 entries in our backup history. We can also, if we want to, because I'm using Ola Hallengren's maintenance solution, his backup scripts, I'm logging all that activity to the command log table. I can just run a query against that table and get very similar set of data. So I'm going to get from command log where command type starts with backup, and go ahead and run that. And this is, I'm not putting any date filters or anything else on it. So this is going to be a much larger list, but you can see it's getting all that same history from there. I'm just going to cancel that because it's going to be a lot. Similar kind of thing. We say we run a regular check DB against all of our databases. Well, prove it. All right. Well, I'm going to run get DBA last good check DB, and that's actually going to interrogate each database and tell when the last good check DB happened. Unfortunately, SQL Server doesn't keep its own history, as far as I know, of when all the check DBs happen. And actually, you can see here, check DB should be performed. It's even going to give me a recommendation here. Wow, it's been 2.5 months since I did a check DB. I should probably do that. It's going to tell me when the database was created and when we last did a good check DB. But again, as I was saying, as far as I know, SQL Server doesn't keep a history of all those check DBs. Luckily, Ola Hallegren's solution does. So I can run in another query against my command log table. And now I can get all of the check DBs that were done against in that history there. So here we've got one. This database doesn't even exist anymore, but I have the history that I was running a check DB against it back in November. And here I did it again the previous day, and I did it 3 days prior. So I have that history, and I can give that again to the audit folks and say, yes, I say I do a check DB on this frequency, and here's the proof that I was doing it. The last one, and I'm not going to run these because these will take a while, is we're sometimes asked, do you test your backups on a regular basis? DBA Tools has a function called test DBA last backup that will do exactly that. It will go out and retrieve the last backup and the full chain. And it will do a restore of that database to an alternate name, run a check DB, and then return the results of that and then drop the database. I do this every Saturday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. My full backups for the week happen at 10 p.m. Saturday night, which means that test DBA last backup is going to get last Saturday's full backup. Then it's going to get the most recent differential backup. And then it's going to do all my log backups to get to this point in time. What does the database look like? And now I can run a check DB against that. So what I do is I run test DBA last backup, and then I write those results to a table in my DBA utility database. And then what I can do later on, again, when the auditors come and ask, I can go ahead and run a query against that database, that exact table, and I'll go ahead and cancel it because it's a lot of data. And here are, find a good one here. Here's a really good one. Here's the result. So I restored my database, successfully restored. It was 350 megs. Here's how long it took to do the restore. Here's how long it took to do the DBCC. Here are the backup dates that were tested. So those are all the backups that went into doing that restore. Here are all the files that I had to restore to do that test. It's all captured there. And again, I can just take it and say, here's all the backups that I restored and tested, and here were the results. And the last thing is, like I said earlier, I'm going to unset that default parameter value because I don't want to be surprised later on. So those are the things that I'm doing actually, this is more than what I do for work, but I wanted to have a really good sample here for everybody. That's what I do, just, high level. Here's how I'm collecting everything. But now the next question is, well, what do I do with all that data? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick this off, and then we'll have some time to answer some questions if anybody wants to. This is a second copy of what you just saw. It's very similar, except what I'm doing is I'm collecting all of that into variables, into objects, so that I can then use it later on. So I'm just going to go ahead and just come all the way down here and run that. I'm going to run all of that. So that's going to run in the background for a moment, probably longer than a moment because it's collecting a lot of stuff. So while we are doing that, are there any other questions that have come up while in that last section?
Yes. Regarding the test DBA last back, do you restore that to a dev test server to verify?
So this is where the licensing question comes into play. You can do that. DBA Tools, that function will let you restore to another server to do the integrity check. You just have to tell it what server is it coming from, what server am I restoring it to, and make sure that both instances have the appropriate permissions on wherever you're storing your backups. So that's the technical answer. Yes, absolutely, you can do that. The licensing answer is check carefully and make sure that whatever instance you are doing that restore onto to do that check DB is appropriately licensed for that purpose. I know at one time, I can't say, I'm not a licensing expert, so I can't say for certain if this is still the case, but at one time, my understanding was that if you take a production database and restore it to another instance for the purposes of running a check DB against that backup of that production data, that constitutes production usage and you have to be appropriately licensed. So technically, yes, there's nothing stopping you from it. Just make sure that you are staying in compliance with all your licensing requirements. And again, I'm not the licensing expert, so I don't know the official 100% correct answer to that. That was just my understanding.
And Sean, I completely agree with you. The answer, boo hiss. Yes, that's yeah. The people who do the licensing get paid their weight in gold because Lord have mercy, I would not even deal with it if I didn't even have to.
Yeah. All right. So our data collection is done. I was just trying to see it pop over and see if there's anything else in chat there. So I'm going to turn the camera off for a second here. All right. So I've collected all that data about my environment. What's the next thing I want to do? The next thing I want to do is I want to get this collected in some way, shape, or form that I can then present to my audit team. So here's where the import Excel module and specifically the export Excel function comes into play. I'm going to create a file name for what I'm going to be outputting. That's easy enough. I'm going to set some default parameter values because otherwise it's going to get really repetitive down here when I call export Excel. So I'm going to add, so my path, obviously where I'm going to write my file to. Auto size, I'm going to have, when I create this Excel file, all the columns are going to be automatically sized to fit the contents. I'm going to apply a filter on that top row because that just makes it easier. I like to make life a little bit easier sometimes for folks. I know that doesn't stay with the DBA stereotype, but I do want to make things a little bit easier for folks. And I'm going to freeze the top row for the same reason. So as you're scrolling through everything, that top row, that header row, stays intact. And this is all done through the export Excel function. What's really cool here is you don't have to have Excel installed where you're running this. So if you have a job server that's just sitting there and running automated tasks all day long, you can create Excel files on that server without having to have Microsoft Excel installed on that machine, which is great for licensing. You don't have to chew up an Office license or whatever for it. So the next thing I'm going to do is take all that data that I collected into objects, and just each one of those is going to go into its own worksheet in that file. And then I'm going to invoke item, which is which really just does the same thing that a double click would do. Invoke item is going to do the same default action that your system is configured for that double clicking in Windows Explorer would do. So go ahead and run that. And then the last thing, that new burnt toast notification is it's just going to pop up hopefully it'll pop up a little notification in my taskbar saying, hey, your job's done. This is going to take a moment because it's a lot of data that's churning through, and it's going to write out to this file. But again, I don't have to have Excel installed where I run this. I've run this on my Mac. These functions, DBA tools is cross-platform on PowerShell 7, as is export Excel. So you can, I'm pretty sure anyway, I've done this on my Mac. I've even run DBA tools functions from my Raspberry Pi. So think about that. You can have a Raspberry Pi sitting off in a corner somewhere, I mean, sitting anywhere really, and it will and you can manage your SQL Server environment from there as long as you have PowerShell installed. And why is this taking this long? Oh, there we go. I just had to scare it. So it's launching Excel and is opening that file, and boom. So I've got an Excel file here with, here are my 3 SQL Server instances. Here are my log paths, all the updates, patch levels. Are we compliant? I can just go ahead and filter what's not compliant. Boom, there we go. So I have 2 that aren't compliant. The certificates, database inventory, everything you saw scrolling by on that screen in the first set of scripts, it's all captured right here. And instance logins, instance roles, role members. I want to get to the permissions because I glossed over that. All permissions. So here we go. We've got the grantee, securable type, what the securable is, what the permission is, and whether they were granted or revoked. And this is, keep in mind, this is just on my laptop with maybe a dozen or maybe 2 dozen total databases, 17,000 lines of permissions here. If somebody really wants to know what's going on in this environment, what's available for people, basically, you're just going to swamp the audit team with data, and hopefully it's everything they've wanted and then some, and they don't come back and ask for follow-up questions. Backup history. Why do I have 2 backup histories? That's interesting. But here's my whole backup history, and that's 346 entries. Last good check DBs, the full history of check DBs, and this goes back, this is 2,149 records going back to at least January, probably further back than that. Oldest to newest. This actually goes back to October of last year. So, and then here's my backup restore tests. You know, the size, whether we were successful or not, all that. Even, hey, did we have an error? Yes, I didn't have enough space to do my restore. And all the other pertinent data about those restore tests. It's all in this one place. So I run that whole script, package it up, send it off to the audit team and say, here's the results, and here's the link to our GitLab environment where the script is that I ran. And please let me know if you have any questions. 3 years running now, I have not had any follow-up questions. After I do this, I give this to them, and that's the end of it. I don't hear anything more about audit requirements, any other detail that's needed. And that is the end of the demo. I really don't have anything else here. I just need to switch over here to, where did my mouse go there? Stop sharing real quick and then reshare. Share, do that, and then I'm just bringing back the that last slides so that everybody can get my contact info. And I think that's the right screen. Yep, there we go. Skip all the way to the end because I went to the wrong place. Oop, great. Well, there's my contact info there. Thank you again all for coming. I know it's a little bit past 1 o'clock. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is andy@flx, it's Foxtrot Lima X-ray SQL.com. It's also my blog. And I will have, I'll post something in the next day or so up there with the links to GitHub and the slide deck and everything. The rest of my social media stuff and everything, it's linked there, but it's also, it's just easier to do Linktree. So I'm a Levy and Rock everywhere: LinkedIn, Mastodon, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, Twitter, but I don't get on Twitter much anymore. So again, thank you all for joining today. And if there are more questions, I am happy to answer them.
Doesn't look like any questions at the moment. Everyone's excited to go off and try some of these things. Yeah, I think everything went really. Oh, Steve asked a good question. Will these scripts work against Azure databases?
That's a really good question. Um, some of those functions will. Actually, probably most of them will. I don't have any Azure databases to test that with at the moment, so I can't say for certain. Anything that's like instance level, you're probably not going to be able to, because on Azure SQL DB, you kind of don't have an instance. I mean, you do, but you don't. Um, but anything at the database level, that all should be accessible. You should be able to get that. The trick with um, with Azure SQL DB is more in getting connected. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky to get connected depending on what your authentication method is. But once you get that sorted out, most of this should work with SQL DB.
Right. Yeah, like you said, if you have managed instance, then most of this should work. If
Yep.
you have just a one database, then it may or may not work. It's as with everything else, especially in Azure. Try it, see what works, what doesn't.
Right. Like um, the check database stuff. You know, as far as I know, in Azure SQL DB, um, Microsoft, I assume, takes that care of that for you. So you would just have when you last did check DB, but you may not have control over or visibility into how frequently it's run. Because remember, I had to go back to my command log table where I record every time I run one of O'Halloran's scripts, one of his stored procedures to capture to execute those. I had to interrogate the command log table to get the check DB history there.
Yep. Just a reminder for anyone who wants to come to one of our next presentations. The next one coming up is on April 23rd. It's Azure ML Ops, Bring Your DevOps to Machine Learning with Stefano Tempesta. And also in May, I forget what date at the moment, but we're having a version 2 of one of our past presentations with Snowflake. I think the one was from back in October. That one's coming up pretty soon. And then again in June is with Armando Lacerda. This is Not Your Daddy's Backup Routine on June 18th. So be sure to come join us for any of that. All kinds of goodness coming up in the near future. And I don't see any more questions. So with that, Andy, I do thank you for coming on and answering all our questions about auditing and giving the auditors as much data as possible, because we know they love data just like we do, just in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, one of my goals with collecting all this stuff is to just throw so much at them that they don't they don't know what hit them, right? And
Amen.
well, there's so much here. I'm sure he answered everything. And like I said, 3 years running, I have not had any follow-up questions, so I must be doing something right.
Gotta like that. All right. Well, we do thank you all. I want to end the recording here. Thank you all so much. Have a great day, and we will see y'all soon.
Thank you.
All right.